Welcome to the Word for Life podcast, a daily devotional covering the entire Bible from Genesis to Revelation.
In Genesis chapter 3, we read about how Adam and Eve sinned against God. But now in chapter 4, we read about the sin of Cain, their son. First, Cain and Abel, the sons of Adam and Eve, bring offerings to the Lord. And the Lord prefers only Abel's sacrifice and not Cain's. Why did the Lord prefer only Abel's sacrifice? The text does not say clearly. One hint is that Abel offered his sacrifices from the firstborn and also the fat portions, which is the best part of animals. But Cain offers some of the fruits of the soil. But you see, the Bible story is not so much focused on God's reason for rejection, but on how Cain reacted when God rejected his offering. Verse 5 tells us Cain was very angry and his face fell. But God interrupts and talks to Cain. Verse 7, he tells Cain, if you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. In other words, God tells Cain to do the right thing, but if he chooses to do the wrong thing now, sin will actually overcome him. But in spite of God's warning, Cain disobeys God just like his parents. He goes out and kills his brother Abel. God comes down and questions Cain just like he questioned his parents. And Cain, just like his parents, gives a stubborn answer. Verse 9, he asks God, am I my brother's keeper? You see, Cain's sin went one step higher than his parents. His parents ate the fruit. Cain now shed innocent blood. And according to God, the shedding of innocent blood pollutes the ground, the earth. And in God's judgment, because Cain has polluted the land, he cannot remain in the land. His parents, Adam and Eve, were sent out from the garden. Now, Cain is driven from all ground because he was a farmer. He had to work the ground. Now, this punishment means he cannot have his livelihood. And Cain also says that whoever finds me will kill me now. But as always, God is gracious even when people sin. And so God puts a visible mark on Cain so that he'll be safe. Cain also finds a future. He finds a wife and then he builds a city, or in other words, he somehow settles down. But if you read from verse 23, the same story of sin follows. There is a man by the name Lamech who comes in the family of Cain. He says he killed a man. You see, Cain killed Abel because God had rejected his offering. Now Lamech kills a man just for wounding him. However, the grace of God remains even in this sinful world. Verse 25 speaks of how God graciously grants a son called Seth to Adam and Eve. And God's grace continues. While Cain was a disappointment in Adam's family, God provides a new line of hope even in Adam's family. When Seth is born, it says, the people of the earth started calling on the name of the Lord, which means they started praying to God. And God provides more grace to the family of Adam. That is what we read in chapter 5. Chapter 5 talks about the generations of Adam. And in the generations of Adam, two children of Adam are highlighted in chapter 5. The first one is Enoch. Enoch models faithfulness to God. He walks with God and he is faithful to God. So faithful that verse 24 says, God took him even when he was alive. You see, this life of Enoch gives hope to humankind that there is still a future with God, even in a sinful world. And in verse 25, there is another Lamech. Previously in chapter 24, there was a son of Cain who was also called Lamech, but he was a murderer like Cain. But now, this Lamech in chapter 5, he bears a son who will bring comfort to the world. And that son was Noah. So in chapter 4 and 5, we saw that sin continued its reign in the world after Adam and Eve sinned. But in spite of this story of sin, God's grace continues parallelly in this world.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you tomorrow for the next episode of the Word for Life podcast.